What is going on, everybody? Welcome in to my top 10 cornerbacks list for the 2021 NFL Draft. Underrated, deep, but good top-heavy class as well. This definitely stacks up above the last couple of years, at least, at the cornerback position. A lot of just lengthy, uber-athletic dudes that project with really high upside at the next level. So it's going to be exciting to get into this list. But first, I want to remind you guys, take out your phones, set a reminder for this Thursday, Friday, Saturday, all of the draft to come back here on YouTube to join me for my live stream. I know you've got a lot of options to consume the draft, but I'm super proud of the time that I've put into studying these players. We're going to have some fun too. We're going to have highlights, live draft grades, all that stuff, you name it. Really excited for draft night, and I appreciate you guys spending that time with me. Really looking forward to it. And then also there's going to be players on here that are on your top 10 list that aren't on mine, and you might want to know my thoughts on those players. Well, I've got 60 corners evaluated on my draft board available on Patreon. So if you want to know my thoughts, opinions, analysis on other corners that did not make this list, go ahead and check out my Patreon in the link below. You'll support the channel in the process as well. Let's go ahead and get into these cornerbacks. There are two players that I just had to mention because I can already picture you guys in the comments showing up. Why do you hate this player? You're sleeping on this guy. I had to turn off the video when Ifeatu Melifonwu or Elijah Molden did not make your list. And I get it. I get the excitement for those players. Let me explain why they're not on my top 10 list. Ifeatu Melifonwu, I see the upside. I get the excitement with the length and the athleticism, but extremely system dependent player in my opinion. In man coverage, I really don't trust him. His lateral agility is an issue. It showed up on tape and at the Senior Bowl. To me, if you are a Seattle 3 press man system, Ifeatu Melifonwu is absolutely a top 10 corner on your board. System, scheme fit in general is something that we really need to take into account at this position. I think it might be the most scheme dependent group or position. So Ifeatu Melifonwu, if you can get in guys' face and use that big physical lengthy corner in the role of like a Richard Sherman, for example, or maybe a Byron Maxwell, go back a couple years, that's Ifeatu Melifonwu to me. But for the majority of teams, there's only like 4 to 7 teams that are going to be looking for this type of corner. For the rest of the league, he's not a top 10 corner to me. Then we've got Elijah Molden. Very simply put there, he is a slot corner. The upside, the positional value just drags him down a little bit here, but I do love him. If you need a slot corner, you could consider him late second round. He's really phenomenal. I've got a Desmond King comparison for him. So very good football player, but not on my top 10 list. Let's start with my number 10 corner here, who is going to be Kelvin Joseph out of Kentucky. And Joseph transferred away from LSU after some undisclosed team issues. He was I don't want to say kicked off the team, but he was suspended for the bowl game in that freshman year, and he ended up transferring away. Now he was behind 2 unbelievable corners in Derek Stingley, and I think it's Hicks or something is the other corner there, but he transfers away, goes inside the SEC, where he can still get that SEC respect, but also get playing time and get to the league, which is very clearly a goal for him. And he was good. He was impressive, especially for his sophomore. The athletic traits here are legit. He is super fun to watch, just move in space, and that's why you have the excitement here. He fits that physical profile, 6 foot, 195. If you just look at a list of the top 30 cornerbacks in the NFL, they're going to be around this mark for the most part. There's going to be exceptions for sure, but this is what NFL teams are looking for, especially with the athleticism like this. So I compare him to Shaquille Griffin, who physically speaking, very similar and about as fast. Also a little bit tight, but Shaquille Griffin didn't really work out in Seattle because he's not an elite sort of zone anticipation or press corner. I think Shaquille Griffin in Jacksonville, if they use him in more man coverage, he might reach a little bit of a higher upside, but he's a good corner regardless, and that's what I see in Kelvin Joseph. He lacks some of the physicality in press, but also you drop him back into zones, he just doesn't play with some of that route recognition and the zone anticipation that you look for. But you put him in a guy's face, a lot of press bail at Kentucky where he gets up on the line of scrimmage, but he's not, jamming him at the line. He's just starting to run with him immediately. But you put him in man coverage, in a lot of ways comparable to L'Jarius Sneed and how he was used for the Chiefs in a simplistic role, but a role that allowed his raw athleticism to thrive. And I think L'Jarius Sneed's game will develop in time. So that's really where I see Kelvin Joseph. He just has the traits and projection of a high-end corner if you can, bring him along. He's actually also very similar to Sean Murphy-Bunting coming out of college, who I think was a little more raw, but had these traits you look for. And you can actually get him later because there's actually a lot of players like Sean Murphy-Bunting, Kelvin Joseph in this class with the physical profile we keep mentioning. So let's go ahead and move on to our number 9 corner here, Marco Wilson out of Florida. A lot of similar things that we just said apply to Marco Wilson, but take the athleticism and amplify it. His movement abilities, simply put, I can only compare the way his speed and just lateral agility and acceleration. It's comparable to Jair Alexander. Denzel Ward comes to mind. Darius Slay comes to mind. There's only so many players in the NFL that have both the speed and the ability to transition in space. It's really impressive to see, and he's a playmaker. He jumps routes in zone coverage, but you'll see that D-plus zone coverage rating. He's basically all risk. He does abandon his area quite a lot. I think he needs a better understanding of what could potentially be developing behind him before he really gets aggressive in zone coverage. So that's kind of the knock on him, is if you're a zone-heavy system, he's probably not going to be the team for you. But if you can use him, like we mentioned with L'Jarius Sneed, or put him in New England where he might be a slot corner, or in Miami or wherever, where you run a lot of man coverage and you're just saying, this is your guy, don't worry about what the play call is, like just stick with this guy, just run with him. I love what he can do there, and the right defensive coordinator is going to really be into Marco Wilson and his upside. So I compare him to Dante Jackson, who I love that comp. I'm not going to get into that, but he's a very good corner who I think would benefit as well from playing in a more man-heavy system. But Marco Wilson, my number 9 corner. And then Tyson Campbell, a little bit different here. So Campbell he doesn't have a low ceiling. I just think when you compare him to some of these uber athletes, like the 2 guys we just talked about, some of the guys coming up, he reminds me a lot of Christian Fulton last year, who ended up falling into the second round, where watching him play was almost boring in a lot of ways because he's so technically sound, but he doesn't have a ton of like anticipation in zone. He doesn't jump routes. You don't see him get a bunch of pass breakups and stuff, but quarterbacks also don't target him a lot because he's always right around his man. So I think he's a player that you can put him in really any system. His press coverage and his length is outstanding. He's got really good technique, the quick feet to stay in front of guys, but also the arm strength and the length to jam guys and the willingness to do it. So just a very sound player that's going to be scheme independent, and I think a solid number 2 corner for a really long time. So I do like Tyson Campbell a lot. And second round, I think you're capitalizing on a super deep cornerback class here and getting a very valuable player. And he is kind of, to me, maybe the epitome of how good this cornerback class really is, because if he's the 8th guy off the board, I look at the last couple years, he would have to be first-round picks with some of these guys that come to mind, like DeAndre Baker, for example, who ended up being first-round picks out of Georgia. So I do like Tyson Campbell a lot. If you value that sort of day one impact over the upside, I could see Campbell being a top 5 corner in this class, because I think he could step in day one and be about as good as anyone on this list. And then you have Eric Stokes, also out of Georgia. Very interesting kind of breaking these 2 guys down because they're a little bit different. When I see Stokes, for one, he's not as like in control, I would say, because a lot of players that have true track speed like Eric Stokes does, Henry Ruggs actually comes to my mind the way he moves, they do have a little bit of difficulty throttling down, which is very important for corners. I think Eric Stokes could be susceptible, for example, to any sort of stopping routes like hitches and comebacks, because he gets up to top speed so quick. And then it's just, even if he is, agile, so to speak, he has a hard time kind of stopping that and getting back and slowing down and playing in the short areas. So very much different from Tyson Campbell there, where Campbell is much more in control throughout the entire route. But that long speed is so valuable because he's going to be able to cover the Deshaun Jacksons, the Henry Ruggs, those types of players, because that's what the NFL is right now. So he is going to add some value for teams that maybe are in a division with a Tyreek Hill and a Henry Ruggs. Like maybe the Chargers would really value an Eric Stokes to be able to run with these speedsters in this division. That's not even mentioning a KJ Hamler there in Denver. So Eric Stokes is kind of scheme independent. I think he's pretty actually good in zone. He's not just a track star. Like he has an eye, a good anticipation for reading the quarterback's eyes. He's not like an elite zone player. But the other thing here is his overall technique, I think, just needs work. It kind of reminded me of Trey Waynes a lot of times, where like he just leans on that athleticism so much. I think his press technique at the line of scrimmage just has work to do. I think the foot speed there and the ability to land those hands and press is just something he can develop. But beyond that, he just doesn't really feel, the receiver in the route. He just leans on his ability to kind of see where he's going and be able to run with him. But a really fun player. And with the right coaching, Eric Stokes has immense upside. And another player that maybe will go in the first round, but if he gets kicked into the second, it's because of the depth in this class. Then a player I'm particularly high on here is Paulson Adibo, who is one of these COVID opt-out sleepers in this class. There's actually a lot of guys that I don't believe get the respect they deserve because of the COVID opt-out, and some people just aren't willing to envision that jump. But a lot of the guys we just talked about, Eric Stokes, Marco Wilson, Kelvin Joseph, if they would have opted out, they're probably not on this list because they got to play and show that development that I absolutely believe would have been there with Paulson Adibo. So you go back to Adibo's sophomore season, he was a projected top 20 player for when he was going to be draft eligible, had one of the all-time cornerback seasons there at Stanford in his sophomore year, and a guy with that physical profile that we talk about, 6'1", 195, good top speed, not great. 4.45 is what he ran, and I totally see that on tape. He's got above average, certainly good enough speed. And the ball skills, I think he's a former receiver. He has outstanding ball skills, similar to Xavier Howard. Just similar, like his ability to just catch stuff. Like he could be like a receiver at times. Really impressive. A smart guy coming out of Stanford. It shows on tape. He has some of the stuff that I think is missing in, say, Marco Wilson or Kelvin Joseph, with the ability to kind of see what route combinations are coming and understanding when he can take those risks, when maybe he needs to get back and protect when he's on that outer third or in a quarters shell. He's got really smooth ability to transition in those off-zone coverages as well. So I love him in that sort of scheme fit, which to me I describe as the balanced boundary, where he can run man coverage, absolutely, but play a lot of off coverage, cover 4, cover 3 bail, that kind of thing is ideal for Paulson Adibo, can utilize those ball skills in those systems really well. But I do think with his length, he's not a bad press player. He's got room to grow there. You could, if you were Seattle looking for that press corner, kind of take him to be maybe your Shaq Griffin replacement. But yeah, I think Adibo opted out and is being slept on because his junior year wasn't as good as his sophomore year. So I think there was a little bit of that fatigue where it's like, oh, he wasn't the best corner in college football as a junior. Well, that's the way things go. Like Stephon Gilmore went from the best corner in the NFL to all of a sudden, was he even a top 10 corner last year? Probably not. It's a very fluctuant position, if that's a word. But that's the way I see Paulson Adibo, is just a little prospect fatigue, put the opt-out on top of it. I think he's a total sleeper. I think NFL teams, someone's going to like this guy as a second-round pick. He's a very good prospect in a lot of classes. Again, would be a first-round pick. Then we have Greg Newsom out of Northwestern. Really fun player to watch. His movement skills are elite. And if it wasn't for some of the other players here above him, we might be talking about Greg Newsom as a top 20 pick. I know I keep saying that, but this class gets me excited, man. But Greg Newsom, I did a film breakdown of him on my Patreon, and I was just impressed. I had a fun time watching him. He is that off-zone corner. He's light. He's not overly physical. He's actually not that great against the run either. He can press. He's got the length and the foot speed to do it, but I don't think he's not J.C. Horn or Patrick Surtain where he lands that jam and the receiver's like caught off balance. It's nothing like that. But just the ability to drop into a cover 4 zone, really heady, high IQ player, surveys the field, takes appropriate risks, and his ability to close on hitches and outbreaking routes. That's kind of the weakness as a cover 4 off man corner, is those quick hitting underneath stuff. So if you're able to flip a switch and hit top speed as fast as Greg Newsom can, or flip your hips and open up in different directions the way he is, that's going to kind of bridge the gap, quite literally the gap that is created as that man that starts 10 yards off the line of scrimmage, where that's a pretty serviceable distance to close on some of those quick outs and hitches and stuff. So he just is really good. I compare him to Desmond Trufant, who has those elite athletic traits, and I think he's going to be as good. Also has some of the injury stuff that Desmond Trufant had as well, which is potentially knocking his value as well. I don't think he finished a season in any 3 years due to injuries, so you do have to keep an eye out for that stuff. He is a more slender player, which could be contributing to some of that stuff. But yeah, really fun player. First, second round. Looking at teams like New Orleans, Green Bay, I think would be very likely destinations who actually run the system we just described. And then J.C. Horn. This is going to be controversial. J.C. Horn is my number 4 corner. I'm just going to say it. I'm not as high on J.C. Horn as a lot of people. They say he's this elite athlete, and he is. I mean, he's 6'1", 205. Most people should not be able to move that way, but we're going to get to Patrick Surtain in a little bit, and this idea that's just consensusly agreed upon that J.C. Horn is this superior athlete to Patrick Surtain, I see very little differences. I do think he's a little more on the stiff side, and I don't think his speed is like elite, right? It's very good. It's 6'1", and the strength that he plays with absolutely means first round talent here. But I compare him to Marcus Peters, and I love that comp. It's one of my favorite comps. I need to make a note because I'm going to make a video next week about my best comps for the draft. But Marcus Peters and J.C. Horn will be on that list because their play style is almost identical. When they're in man coverage, very grabby players, but those physical traits shine, the length. So a guy that is going to make some really exciting plays in man coverage, just as we see with J.C. Horn on tape. But at the same time, you're going to get penalized a lot with the play style he has. So that's a little bit of a knock. And then in zone coverage, high risk, high reward player. I do think there's going to be a lot of times where he is jeopardizing his position to go make that play, which is Marcus Peters in a nutshell. How many times we've talked about Marcus Peters being a guy that always seems to get 4 or 5 picks every year, but he's also going to get beat. And I see that in J.C. Horn. So it sounds like I'm talking down on him. I'm really not. Marcus Peters in the first round, you're going to do that every day of the week. But he might be a player that there's going to be some games where I'm not going to say he costs you the game, but I think he's going to give up some big plays. I think he's going to get a lot of penalties in the NFL just with his play style. And to me, that just knocks him down a little bit compared to some of these other guys who I just think are just so clean and phenomenal. So that's the J.C. Horn bit there. I do like him quite a bit. But I also think people are a little bit too high on him, and I'm just going to say potentially overreacting to the Auburn game. That was one of the best cornerback games, not just of last year, but of the decade. Like, his game against Auburn was just stupid, but you watch his tape in the other games, and he frankly doesn't look all that much like a first-round cornerback. So that's J.C. Horn. And then number 3 is Caleb Farley. He would be number 2 if it were not for these injury concerns. So just real quick, as far as his game, I compare him to Darius Slay. Everything we said about Greg Newsom, about that off-zone, speed, transition ability, high IQ player that will read routes and jump things very quickly, that applies to him. But he also is an elite athlete that will be able to run man coverage. He also can press much better to me than Greg Newsom. So on the field, he is, to me, the number 2 corner in this class, and very likely the highest upside player in this class. I don't know if there will be a higher quote-unquote upside corner in the NFL other than maybe Jalen Ramsey, but even that, Caleb Farley is quicker than Jalen Ramsey. Just if you want to talk about raw athleticism, he is insane. Maybe Patrick Peterson in his prime would be a decent comp for Caleb Farley as well. But this injury stuff, a lot of teams aren't going to want to mess around with this. So he has a microdiscectomy. So basically, there are these discs in the spine that are between, I think it's the vertebrae, right? The bones, that his discs have now twice become inflated or have slid out to the point where when things brush up against those discs in his spine, it hurts like hell. And the problem here is the recovery is quick with this, but he can't play after this surgery, right? But the recovery is pretty quick. It's like 9 weeks or something. But the issue here is there's about a 20% chance that whatever caused the injury in the first place is due to his, now I'm getting over my pay grade, but whatever is going on in his body, there is about a 20% chance with this injury that it is going to be a pertinent issue, especially with high athletic pressure going on that spine. And the really scary thing is here, that was the second time Caleb Farley has had that surgery. So I don't know if that means that he for sure is going to have these pertinent issues. This is the same exact injury that shortened Tony Romo's career. Remember, at the end of his career, he had this surgery 2 or 3 times, and it felt like every time he got touched, he was done for the year. So this is a legitimate concern. Anytime you talk about back stuff and potentially recurring injuries, teams are going to be scared of that. So as a corner, he's phenomenal. What do you do with that in the draft? Does he go first round? Does he go fourth round? I don't know, but his upside is so intriguing. I love watching Caleb Farley play football. And any team, it really doesn't matter what your system is going to be in love with his tape. It really just comes down to that injury with Caleb Farley. So that does push him below Asante Samuel for me, who he's got to be one of my top 5 my guys in this class. Asante Samuel is insanely underrated to the point where I don't see him on everyone's top 10 lists. I see him going second, third round sometimes. No way. Asante Samuel clearly grew up watching his dad play football because he does not get enough credit for how smart he plays in zone coverage. So you have the high IQ in zone, but the athleticism is elite. And I know you're getting sick of me saying that, but this corner class, it's stupid how athletic these guys are. But Asante Samuel, watching him move in space is really fun. He just glides from place to place. His top speed isn't what Farley has. It's not what Eric Stokes has. It's not what Marco Wilson has, but it's certainly good enough. He's got real 4.4 speed, which is certainly fast enough. But just his ability to transition in space and get from point A to point B like that, it's really fun to see. And he plays so heady that he's always right at guys' hip pockets, whether it's in man coverage or zone coverage. He just has such a good feel for where the receivers are going and where he needs to be. He jumps routes. He's got good ball skills. He's also really tough and instinctive as a run defender. It's going to allow a team that, let's say, last year for the Dolphins when they took Noah Igbenogany, or maybe the Green Bay Packers, which I think is a great landing spot for him, or the Tennessee Titans even, who Vrabel played with Samuel's father, who they have outside corners, but they need a young slot guy that can come in and play that slot role. Chris Harris also comes to mind when I watch Asante Samuel. There's so many good comps for him. I have a low comp of Kyle Fuller and a high comp of Tre'Davious White. He could be just like his dad. I just glow talking about Asante Samuel. Now, some teams are going to look at that height, and it's going to be a turnoff. But I think we've seen around the league with Jair Alexander the emergence of Tre'Davious White as a top corner. You look at even a Darius Williams for the Rams, who had one of the top corner seasons last year at 5'9". I think in the right system, that height is just not going to hold him back. But if you are a team like Seattle, who you look for that length on the outside, he's not really going to be that high on your draft board. But one of my favorite players in this class for sure, and I am clearly higher on him than most. A true first-round grade that I don't even have on J.C. Horn. And then my number 1 corner is Patrick Surtain, who I also think is incredibly underrated. Like, I don't say that lightly for a top 10 pick that everyone kind of agrees he's a first-round talent, a top 12, 15 player or whatever. But Patrick Surtain might be the best corner that I've evaluated in the last 4 years since I started this channel. I like him a lot more than what I saw from Jeffrey Okudah. I think he's a better athlete than Jeffrey Okudah, who everyone was glowing about his athleticism last year. Patrick Surtain, I think he's a better athlete, and he's bigger. So I don't understand this idea that he's not fast enough. I don't think his 4.4 40 is like necessarily exactly what his speed is. There might be something to that because he is bigger. He's not an elite speed guy, but I do think he's plenty fast to do it. My low comp on him is Jimmy Smith, who was a great corner for years. So there's that. And then the first thing I noticed when I watched Patrick Surtain, and this was in January, way before these workout grades came out, his first step quickness, his ability to close on routes in short areas is exceptional. Very Jalen Ramsey-esque with that ability. So the athleticism questions to me don't make any sense. He is a phenomenal athlete at 6'2", 208. You don't get that. You just don't. He, to me, is a top 5 player in this class and a potentially blue chip prospect, to be honest, which is really hard to do for a corner. I didn't say that about Jeffrey Okudah last year. So he's awesome for me. His technique across the board is rare. His press is the best I've ever seen from a college corner. His zone awareness, he's also the son of a former superstar in the NFL who knows the game really well. When he drops, he has that route recognition and anticipation. His ball skills are great. He is insanely competitive in the run game that you're not going to find. And because of those athleticism things I talked about, I think his man coverage is being slept on. Now, if I'm running like a true man scheme, I might lower him, but I don't know. I think he can run, especially a press man system, really, really well. So honestly, I don't get why it's a debate who the number 1 cornerback in this class is. When I watch him and J.C. Horn, it is not even a question to me. Surtain to me is, I don't get the athleticism differences that everyone throws out there. I think Surtain might be a little slower, but it's not like, oh my God, he can't move the way J.C. Horn does. I don't think that way at all. I think, if anything, he actually has a better first step. And then you pair that with he doesn't grab. He doesn't get overly physical the way J.C. Horn does. I think he's a smarter player in zone. He's a much more consistent run defender. So, yeah, it's really not close for me at all. Patrick Surtain, to me, he's not a sleeper in this class because he's going to go to Dallas at 10. But I think it's almost like prospect fatigue with him because he's been so freaking good for the entire time at Alabama. And then you get the one big game from J.C. Horn. It's like, look, he had one game that was better than any game Patrick Surtain had, therefore he's a better corner. No, Patrick Surtain was so unbelievably consistent from day one at Alabama. I don't get it. I don't get why Patrick Surtain isn't the consensus number 1 corner, especially with the injury stuff for Caleb Farley. Farley's the only guy on this list that I could understand why you think he's a better cornerback prospect. But now that Farley's kind of been pushed down the board, I think people are doing it with J.C. Horn. That's a tangent, but I firmly believe that Patrick Surtain, if this wasn't a year where all these quarterbacks were going in the top, or these elite receivers and Kyle Pitts and all that stuff, I think he should be in the top 5 conversation. I think he's one of the best players, defensive players in this class, right there with Micah Parsons. It's either him or Parsons. So, big fan of Patrick Surtain. Hope you guys enjoyed the top 10 cornerbacks video. It's a super exciting class, really underrated class. And if you need a corner this year, it's a really good year to need one. And you're going to be getting potentially superstars in the second round this year. I firmly believe that. Hope you guys enjoyed. Let me know your thoughts down below, who you think should have made this list that I left off. Do you like the list? Reminder to come back on draft night to get all of the exciting insight and analysis and reactions. Appreciate you guys for watching, and we'll see you this weekend for my top 10 safeties. Peace.